doing that experimentation and that hard work are not now the ones that are seeing much of the growth in the organic market, and certainly not so on their bottom lines. At the same time, because of this corporate liquidation of the word organic, organic products are now losing some credibility in the marketplace. Last year, the Consumers Union downgraded its rating of the USDA organic seal from highly meaningful to meaningful. And that was based on an extensive survey amongst an incredibly wide panoply of organic consumers. If the organic seal is losing credibility in the marketplace, that is a huge and looming problem for us. Last April, Whole Foods opened a new store in our region. I sell vegetables to several Whole Foods stores, full disclosure, but they're discovering that store's sales are about 40% below their projections. Nationwide, Whole Foods same-store sales are down in late 2015, and they're laying off some 3,000 employees. That's bad news for medium-sized family farms, because Whole Foods has long been a willing buyer of regionally produced foods, both organic and conventional. Whether it's basic foods like vegetables or meat or milk, or processed foods like cookies and tofu and hummus. Whole Foods' most challenging competition is now coming from Walmart and Costco, both of which require that your product be in every single one of their stores or none of them. There's no place in that market for the medium-sized family farm. It's this commoditization, again, of organic. Out on the farm, it's way too easy in the press of work to ignore such things. Back in Quebec, where OCIA began 31 years ago this week, we have an expression: agriculture, 36 métiers, 36 misères. Farming, it's 36 different professions and 36 different miseries. And in that press, it's so easy to ignore some of the big picture stuff that doesn't make our job any easier. When your target consumer market begins to describe organic as overpriced and too expensive for any perceived difference in quality, and the big box operations are also competing on the basis of lowering prices and margin and quality, then we got a serious long-term threat on our hands, especially in view of that downward price pressure. I wish it were otherwise, but that's where we sit. Like the lack of incoming young people, it smacks of a moribund system. And we have to grow our true market. Have to convince them it's worth coughing up some extra money in what is increasingly a deflationary environment. Right now, people still believe that lower prices are something they can get because they were able to negotiate it or find a bargain. But the time is coming when those lower prices are going to be increasingly demanded, and the more the big box stores and so on and the processors get into this business, the more downward pressure there's likely to be on organic farm gate prices. I think that this may be an existential threat to organic. I'm not sure, but it might be. Fortunately, market demographics are at least finally beginning to work slowly in our direction again. Parents with young children are more willing to spend for organic than most other people. And births of the millennial generation peaked in 1991. This emerging generation seems to be having its children from about ages 28 to 35, and we're now seeing the leading edge of this new rise in births beginning to come along. They're going to be out there with kids, and they're going to want organic. So that is one little bright spot in what is currently a fairly bleak picture. You know, I grew up along the coast, and low tide, always pretty smelly and ugly. And we may be approaching that low tide in the reverse. barring other factors, it's probably going to be these folks, these parents of the young kids that carry our industry through the 2020s. It's time to get ready, because the early wave of organic practitioners and advocates are about to age out of the industry. And we need to begin addressing that. We have to start thinking how we're going to address these overlapping issues of succession and the market. There's got to be a viable market for the young and aspiring farmers who are going to take over, or they're just not going to be interested. When third grade kids know how to install a condom on a cucumber, but don't have the slightest idea where that cucumber comes from or how much work is required to grow the thing and get it onto the store shelves, I think we've got a problem in our education system that we begin to drop some serious effort and some money into cultivating those people as a market, so that by the time they're having their own children, then they're going to see organic as a major pathway to go. Modern kids are isolated and perhaps even alienated right now from the production side and from the food they eat. I'm not going to assign any blame here, but it's something we've got to fix, because I think our markets and the survival of our farms and families and the sustainability of the system are going to depend on that. So as bleak as it all sounds, I think it highlights the potential of a new and durable approach to food production, distribution, and consumption. The fads may have run for a bit, but they're no longer sustainable. They're a little bit like a grass fire that's exhausted most of what it's got to burn. So we must cultivate a solid and sustainable market for organic food. That's going to take some work. And it will unfold only as we can highlight demonstrable differences in quality, which will justify a premium price. We can educate the rising generations of our consumers to the value of that quality difference. Nobody is better suited to doing that than the well-managed, medium-sized family farm or a processing business supported by an active crop improvement association. Compare Kraft slices to 3-year-old Ontario cheddar, or Boulevard beer to Bud Light. Compare bologna to a well-aged steak. Okay? Organic is never going to be mainstream. Let's just get used to that. Okay? Kraft slices aren't going away. We have to know and understand and serve our markets, which is going to require a lot more effort and attention than we've paid or devoted in the past. As I'll discuss later today, organic is a marketing decision. So, here's the payoff. We are quite probably nearing the end of a multi-generation consolidation trend in agriculture. Believe it or not, such consolidation trends have repeated cyclically for millennia of human history. They've ebbed and they've flowed. The previous consolidation culminated in what was called the bonanza farm of the late 19th and early 20th century. They were huge, some of them 14, 20,000 acres, all done with horses even. But there was a consolidation, okay, as the fragmented family farms of the 1860s and 1870s ended up getting consolidated into this bonanza movement. Okay. Similar phenomena prevailed in the Middle Ages, just before the Renaissance, and even back as far as Roman times. The latifundia movement gives rise to an astounding agricultural consolidation. Every one of those consolidations fell apart after a couple of generations. And it went back to small family farms. I see no reason to believe that the current situation is going to end up any differently, as grim as it looks right now. The system has got to fall apart under its own weight, its inconsistencies, and its inherent unmanageability. So who's going to be there to repopulate the farms as these bigger consolidated operations start to fragment and disintegrate? Who's going to be there to guide them? A critical tactic in attempting to preserve and protect biological species that are in trouble is the creation of what are called refugia. And now the family farm is definitely a species in trouble, if you will. Numerous and often scattered refuges can preserve populations of the troubled species while waiting for general conditions to improve enough that will permit an expansion of the population into former barren ground. 18,000 years ago, there was no Amazon rainforest. Let that sink in. Amazonia was open savanna like Eastern Africa today, and the only thing that could pass for a rainforest was a tiny little refuge no more than 10 by 15 miles in southern Guyana. Yet as conditions began to shift to more favorable conditions, the plants of that small area were able to repopulate and propagate and spread themselves across the immense area of the Amazon basin to the rainforest that we know today. Family farming currently maintains a number of similar refugia, especially the organic farms. And I think that that's perhaps one of the most important things we need to take away with us today, that family organic farming, those are the refugia for well-managed family-scale agriculture. OCIA is in a particularly unique position to maintain and strengthen the populations of well-managed, medium-sized family farms, organic and otherwise. Essential to that purpose, however, is that we must assist our members in making the generational transfer successful. And we must assist them in developing the crop improvement and management skills as systems which will lead to prosperous farms. Most of our conventional colleagues need it just as badly as we do. Probably more. And we must be willing to welcome them enthusiastically into this journey, even though when they have no intention of ever becoming certified organic producers. We may be a resource that exists nowhere else for their families and their family's future. The subsidies and the grants are going to disappear. Arithmetic will win every time, sooner or later. And our job is to assist the entire farm community with crop improvement ideas, encouragement, education that will help the struggling remnant of family farms to persist until the tide changes. Like I said, growing up on the coast, it always kind of stinks at low tide. So like it or not, we are now the guardians. We're the practitioners, and we're the improvers of the old agronomic wisdom. In some ways, we're like the Irish monks on their grotty little rain-soaked islands, preserving the faith as the entire Roman world in which they arose collapsed around them. Those monks who fought and often died in Viking raids never knew the final outcome of their efforts, but they believed enough in the future and in their responsibility to preserve and protect and promote it that they devoted immense effort to the task. Our children are the most important crop on our farm. Our successors are the most important crop on our farm, because in the cycle of things, we are now approaching the point whereas when the tide changes, and it always does, these people will be vitally important to the reestablishment of a rational, nourishing, and environmentally responsible agriculture. We, as both individuals and an association, we need to put on the leather gloves and get to work for the future generations of family farmers, medium-sized, whether they're organic or not. And we just need to recognize that we are a resource for those people, and we cannot fulfill that role unless, first of all, we're a little bit humble, And second of all, we're open and encouraging without trying to push anything down anybody's throat. There's a lot riding on it. Most of us in this room will not see the final outcome of it. But it's still worth working for anyway. Let's get those gloves on and let's go to work.